This is the story of a man who went from one of Hollywood's most promising young actors to a convicted felon sleeping in a California state prison to the highest paid actor on the planet, and how a decade of addiction, arrests, and financial ruin became the foundation for something nobody in the industry expected. Robert Downey Jr. sits today at an estimated $300 million net worth, having pulled in somewhere between $500 million and $600 million from the Marvel Cinematic Universe alone. But for roughly 15 years, from the mid-1980s through the early 2000s, studios wouldn't touch him, insurers refused to cover him, and industry reports place him more than $2 million behind on state and federal income taxes. Let's be clear about that figure from the start. It shows up in dozens of celebrity finance articles, but not one of them points to an actual IRS document, a California Franchise Tax Board lien, or a court filing with that number attached. What is documented in court records, news archives, and on-the-record quotes is a collapse so complete and so public that whether it was $2 million or considerably more almost doesn't change the story. What follows is what actually happened, based on what can actually be verified. The Rise. April 4th, 1965. Manhattan, New York. And Robert John Downey Jr. enters a world that was already, in a specific sense, show business. His father, Robert Downey Sr., directed strange underground films in the late 1960s and early 70s. His mother, Elsie Ann Ford, worked as an actress. The screen debut came at age 5, not in a school play, but in his father's 1970 film Pound, and then again in 1972 in Grease's Palace. High school didn't hold his attention long enough to finish, and by 1985, he'd landed a spot on Saturday Night Live alongside Joan Cusack, Anthony Michael Hall, John Lovitz, Dennis Miller, and Randy Quaid. The entire new cast got fired after one critically panned season. Less Than Zero in 1987 changed everything. Downey played Julian Wells, a young man being pulled apart by drug addiction, and Roger Ebert called the performance so real, so subtle, and so observant that it's scary. Janet Maslin at the New York Times described it as desperately moving. A 22-year-old was playing addiction with an authenticity that, in hindsight, may have been drawing from something very close to home. 5 years later came Chaplin, which earned him a BAFTA Award for Best Actor and an Academy Award nomination, lost to Al Pacino for Scent of a Woman, and confirmed what the industry had suspected since Less Than Zero. By the early 1990s, the world appeared to be entirely his. The friendship that would later save him. Before getting into the collapse, there's one relationship worth establishing, because it becomes the thread that pulls everything back together later. In 1990, Downey co-starred with Mel Gibson in Air America, a film that cost $35 million and grossed just over $36 million worldwide. Not a success by any measure. But somewhere on that set, the two men struck up a genuine friendship that outlasted the box office numbers by more than 3 decades. Gibson was one of the most powerful people in Hollywood. Downey was a rising star with a habit that was becoming harder to manage by the year. Neither man could have predicted how much that connection would matter, but it was being set in motion. The Fall, 1996. June 23rd, 1996, Pacific Coast Highway, Malibu. And that's when the public unraveling began. Pulled over for speeding, Downey's truck was searched and deputies found black tar heroin, powdered heroin, crack cocaine, and an unloaded .357 Magnum. The Oscar-nominated star of Chaplin had just been caught on a California highway with heroin, cocaine, and a gun. Just over 3 weeks later, it got worse. On July 16th, while out on bail, Downey walked into the unlocked Malibu home of his neighbor, Lisa Curtis, stripped off most of his clothes, folded them neatly on a chair, and fell asleep in the bed of her 11-year-old son. Curtis couldn't wake him and called 911. The tabloids called it the Goldilocks incident, but strip away the dark comedy. And what remains is a man so consumed by drugs that he'd wandered into a stranger's child's bedroom with no memory of doing so. That's not entertainment. That's a medical emergency. 2 days after Goldilocks, Judge Lawrence Mira ordered Downey into the Exodus Recovery Center in Marina del Rey. 2 days after that, Downey climbed out through a bathroom window and ran. Recaptured within 4 hours, he spent 9 days in jail and was back before Mira within the month. September 1996 brought a no-contest plea to the felony drug charges. November 1996 brought 6 months of live-in rehab, 3 years of probation, and frequent drug testing. And that's when the financial dimension comes into focus, because when this kind of news breaks, the phone doesn't stop ringing gradually. The offers don't slow down, they stop, and the bills keep arriving anyway. Prison, 1997 through 1999. Rehab, release, relapse, rearrest, court date, repeat. That cycle ran through 1999, familiar to anyone following the story. In 1997, a drug counselor testified Downey had skipped a required test. Mira found a probation violation, and Downey served 113 days at Los Angeles County Men's Central Jail. August 1999 was when the bottom arrived fully. Facing Judge Mira again, this time with Robert Shapiro, the same Shapiro from the O.J. Simpson defense team, arguing for treatment over incarceration, Downey heard the judge's answer from the bench. "I don't believe your client is committed to not using drugs. You may call that addiction. But there is some level of choice. I don't think we have any alternative. We have used them all." Before sentencing, Downey spoke to the court himself. "It's like I've got a shotgun in my mouth," he said, "with my finger on the trigger, and I like the taste of the gunmetal." 3 years, California State Prison. North Kern first, then the California Substance Abuse Treatment Facility in Corcoran, where he served approximately 1 year. No income. Legal fees from proceedings going back to 1996. Rehabilitation costs. Child support for his son Indio, born in 1993 to his then-wife actress Deborah Falconer. The earnings from Chaplin and Air America weren't going to hold against all of that indefinitely. And the IRS doesn't suspend collections because a taxpayer is sitting in a prison cell. The money owed kept climbing while the money coming in had ceased entirely. Ally McBeal and the final collapse. August 2000. Early release, $5,000 bail. And in one of the stranger decisions in television history, the producers of Ally McBeal cast Robert Downey Jr. as a series regular on a hit Fox legal drama. He played Larry Paul, a love interest in season 4, taking home what he later recalled as $115,000 per week. The performance earned him a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor in a TV series and an Emmy nomination. For a few months, it looked like the story might be turning. Thanksgiving Day, November 25, 2000, an anonymous 911 call led police to Merv Griffin's hotel in Palm Springs, where officers found Downey alone with approximately 4 grams of cocaine and 16 Valium pills. Released on $15,000 bail, he offered reporters a line that has stuck for 25 years. "I'm not a movie star, I'm a guy with a drug problem." April 24, 2001. LAPD found Downey wandering barefoot in Culver City, tests confirmed cocaine, and he was released within hours. Creator David E. Kelley rewrote the Ally McBeal season finale, which had been building toward a wedding for Downey's character, and removed him entirely. Kelley's statement, "Robert is a unique talent and a very special person, and we wish him the best and hope for his full recovery." July 2001 brought a no-contest plea to the Palm Springs charges. Under California's Proposition 36, which directed non-violent drug offenders toward rehab rather than prison, Downey got 3 years of probation and 1 year at Wavelengths International. 36 years old, multiple arrests over 5 years, time in 2 correctional facilities, fired from the show that gave him a second chance. His marriage to Deborah Falconer was effectively over. The insurance industry and the studio system had collectively written him off. The financial wreckage. That $2 million figure attached to Downey's name in tax articles has circulated so long it has accumulated the feeling of established fact. But it isn't. None of the articles pointing to it reference an actual IRS filing, a specific tax year, or a named lien holder. One source goes further and claims Downey pleaded guilty to tax evasion, which is demonstrably false. Every plea he entered was drug-related, not tax-related. What the record does allow, Downey had real income in the early to mid-1990s from Chaplin, Air America, and his other work. Beginning in 1996, those earnings stopped for the better part of 5 years. Attorney fees, rehabilitation costs, child support, housing, all of it accumulating against an income stream that had gone silent. The Malibu house was gone. Multiple accounts describe him as effectively homeless during stretches of this period. And 1999 through 2001, the imprisonment, the Ally McBeal collapse, the Culver City arrest, was when any unpaid tax liability would have been building fastest, because that was when his financial exposure was highest and his income was zero. People with knowledge of Hollywood's financial infrastructure have consistently described a liability in the millions. The precise number can't be confirmed from primary sources. The general picture can. The Turn, Burger King, Susan Levin, and Mel Gibson. Wavelengths International wrapped in 2002, and July 2003 is the moment Downey has consistently pointed to as the genuine turning point. The story he tells is almost absurdly fitting. A Burger King meal found so unappealing that something in him broke loose. Not a courtroom, not a prison cell. A fast food meal became the thing that stuck where years of formal intervention had not. He threw the remainder of his drugs into the ocean. Wing Chun Kung Fu, yoga, meditation, and therapy were what he built around that decision in the months that followed. That same year, on the set of a psychological thriller called Gothica, he met Susan Levin, then an executive vice president of production at Silver Pictures. Her own account of the early relationship is notable for what it lacked: any romanticization of addiction. Addiction was so foreign to me, she said. I was incredibly ignorant of the hold it had on people. Her terms were direct. I made it clear that to stay with me, nothing could happen. Downey held. He proposed the night before her 30th birthday in November 2003, and they married August 27, 2005, in Amagansett, New York. Years later, he reflected, "Thank God for that. If she knew the depths of my depravity, we would not be sitting here." The personal anchor was in place. Getting back into Hollywood required someone willing to put money on the line, and that someone was Mel Gibson. In 2003, Gibson was developing The Singing Detective and wanted Downey in the lead. The obstacle was insurance. No production company was going to cover an actor with Downey's track record without an extraordinary guarantee. Gibson provided it personally, writing a check out of his own pocket to cover Downey's insurance bond. The film got made. More than that, Downey had demonstrated something to an industry that had stopped believing in him. He could show up, do the work, and be trusted. Iron Man and the Reversal. Director Jon Favreau wanted Robert Downey Jr. to play Tony Stark in Iron Man, Marvel Studios' first entirely in-house production, billed as the launch of a new cinematic universe. The Marvel executives weren't convinced. The insurance issues hadn't gone away. Favreau fought for the casting anyway, and the salary that came back was $500,000. Not a large number for a film's lead in 2008, and one that reflected exactly what the industry thought of Downey's leverage. A 2015 Rolling Stone interview with Terrence Howard added a layer the press releases didn't include. Howard said he took a $1 million pay cut from his own deal, with $500,000 going toward Downey's paycheck and another $500,000 toward covering his insurance bond. the man who would become the face of the most lucrative franchise in cinema history needed a co-star to personally subsidize his ability to be there. Iron Man opened May 2nd, 2008, and the trajectory permanently changed. Iron Man 2 in 2010 brought approximately $10 million. The Avengers in 2012 reportedly generated around $50 million with back-end participation. Forbes named Downey the highest-paid actor in Hollywood in 2013 at $75 million, then again in 2014, then again in 2015 at $80 million. Variety, reporting in July 2024, placed his total MCU career takes somewhere between $500 million and $600 million, earned across 4 Avengers films, 3 Iron Man outings, and several cameos. From $500,000 to somewhere north of $500 million. Whatever tax liability had accumulated during the lost years was paid back many times over. The pardon, the Oscar, and the full circle. Christmas Eve 2015. Governor Jerry Brown signed a full and unconditional pardon for Downey's 1996 felony drug conviction. The proclamation's language: Robert John Downey Jr. has paid his debt to society and earned a full and unconditional pardon. He has lived an honest and upright life, exhibited good moral character, and conducted himself as a law-abiding citizen. In October of that same year, 2 months before the pardon, he'd been inducted into the California Hall of Fame. On Jimmy Kimmel Live, he noted, "I think I might be the first inductee who's been in the correctional system." March 10, 2024. Downey won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for his performance as Lewis Strauss in Oppenheimer, a portrayal built from calculation, vanity, and suppressed resentment, about as far from Tony Stark as the same actor could get. His acceptance speech opened, "I'd like to thank my terrible childhood and the Academy," in that order. July 2024 brought the announcement that Downey would return to Marvel, not as Tony Stark, but as Dr. Doom in Avengers. Doomsday and Avengers: Secret Wars, in a deal reported to exceed $100 million. And 4 years earlier, in November 2011, Downey had accepted the American Cinematheque's 25th Annual Award and personally chosen Mel Gibson to present it. Gibson had become one of Hollywood's more polarizing figures by then, dealing with his own very public failures. Downey addressed it directly. "He kept a roof over my head and food on the table," he told the audience. And then, "Unless you're completely without sin, in which case you picked the wrong fucking industry. In forgiving my friend his trespasses and offering him the same clean slate you have given me, allowing him to continue his great and ongoing contribution to our collective art without shame. He's hugged the cactus long enough." Hugging the cactus was a phrase Gibson had given Downey years earlier, a way of describing what it means to sit with consequences instead of running from them. Downey had applied it to himself first. "If I accepted responsibility for my wrongdoings and embraced that part of my soul that was ugly," he said that if I hugged the cactus long enough, I'd become a man of some humility and my life would take on new meaning. Showing up at his own industry honor and using it to defend the man who had once personally underwritten his ability to work is not a gesture that gets made by accident. The $2 million tax debt in the title is, in the strictest evidentiary sense, unverified. No IRS lien, no franchise tax board document, no court filing with that number on it has turned up in the public record. What can be said is that the conditions for a large tax liability were clearly present. Prior earnings, followed by years of zero income, accumulated legal costs, rehabilitation expenses, and imprisonment. The figure has been repeated by enough people with industry knowledge that it reflects something real. The precise number cannot be confirmed. None of that, though, is actually the story. The story is a man who developed an addiction he described as having a gun in his mouth that he liked the taste of, who cycled through arrests and prison and treatment programs for the better part of a decade, and who then, through some combination of personal will and a Burger King parking lot, and a woman who declined to manage his disease, and a friend who wrote a check, and a director who went to the mat for him, rebuilt everything. Rebuilt it so completely that Forbes put him at the top of its highest paid actor list 3 years running, that he holds an Oscar now, and that he's returning to the franchise that gave him his second act, this time as the villain. He thanked his terrible childhood and the Academy in that order. Given everything that came between those two things, that might be the most earned sentence anyone has ever spoken at that podium. Let us know which your favourite celebrities you want us to discover next in the comment, and don't forget to hit the bell and subscribe. See you next week with Backstage Hollywood Deep Dives.